So picture this. You get into a traffic accident, and the police report says it's mostly your fault. You'd probably assume you're on the hook for the damages, right? Well, a really interesting case out of China just completely flips that idea on its head. It reveals this fascinating legal principle where being at fault doesn't actually mean you're the one who has to pay up.
Here's the rundown. In May of 2025, a motorcycle and an e-bike collide. Pretty standard stuff. The police show up, they do their investigation, and they decide the e-bike rider has the primary responsibility. Seems straightforward, doesn't it? But here is where it gets weird. The motorcycle driver, the guy who is found to be less at fault, turns around and sues the 70-year-old man he just hit. And this is where a simple traffic accident turns into a huge legal eye-opener.
All right, so first up, the crash, and this truly bizarre lawsuit. To really get how strange this whole thing was, you have to understand the people who were involved.
So on one side, you've got Zheng Zhangji. He's a 70-year-old man, he's illiterate, and he's just riding his e-bike. On the other side is Wang Chuankai, a 27-year-old professional with a good job riding a much more powerful motorcycle. You can already see this isn't just a crash between two vehicles, it's a collision between two totally different worlds, and it highlights a pretty big power imbalance right from the start. So the police report comes out, and on the surface, it seems pretty black and white. Mr. Zhang, the elderly man on the e-bike, gets primary responsibility because he turned without yielding. But, and this is important, Mr. Wang wasn't let off the hook either. He got secondary responsibility for speeding near a crosswalk. So you're looking at basically a 70-30 split of fault. Case closed? Oh, not even close.
What happened next is just, wow. Instead of showing any concern for the 70-year-old man he just ran into, Wang immediately goes on the offensive. He starts demanding money, insisting that since Zhang was 70% at fault, he owed 70% of the motorcycle's repair costs. And he didn't just ask, he flat out threatened the old man with a lawsuit if he didn't pay.
So you gotta ask, why was Wang so sure he'd win this? Well, it's because he was operating under a really common but totally wrong assumption about how fault works.
Wang's logic kind of makes sense, right? If you're 70% responsible, you pay 70% of the bills. It's just simple math. But this is where the law throws a massive curveball. It makes a huge distinction, separating the fault for causing the crash from the liability for paying for the damages. And that's especially true when a big motor vehicle hits a smaller, non-motor one.
And this brings us to the core of the whole story. There's one specific law that completely flips this entire case on its head, and it's designed specifically to protect the more vulnerable person on the road. The entire case boils down to this one piece of legislation, Article 76 of the Road Traffic Safety Law. Now, this article isn't for just any accident. It's specifically for situations just like this one, when a powerful motor vehicle, like a car or a motorcycle, hits a non-motor vehicle or even a pedestrian. And this law is built on a really powerful idea called the principle of superior risk. The concept is actually pretty simple. The person operating the bigger, faster, more dangerous machine, the superior vehicle, has a much higher responsibility to be careful simply because they pose a much greater danger to everyone else.
So let's break down how this actually works. It's pretty clear. 1. If the guy on the e-bike or the pedestrian has zero fault, the motorist pays 100% of their damages. 2. If the non-motorist does have some fault, like Mr. Zhang did, the motorist liability just gets reduced a bit. And 3. This is the real kicker. Even if the motorist has absolutely no fault, they can still be on the hook for up to 10% of the liability. Now notice what's missing here? There's nothing, absolutely nothing that says the non-motorist has to pay for the motorist's vehicle repairs. So Zhang's fault only reduces how much Wang might have to pay him, not the other way around.
Okay, so we all get the law now. But Wang, well, he either didn't know or didn't care, and he hauled this 70-year-old man to court anyway. Let's see how that worked out for him. So Wang presents his case with this list of demands, and it just completely falls apart under a tiny bit of scrutiny. He claimed medical costs, but he didn't even see a doctor until the day after the accident. He wanted 420 yuan for transportation, which is just a ridiculous amount for 2 doctor visits. He demanded 14 days of lost wages, but his own doctor only recommended 7. And that nearly 3,000 yuan for his motorcycle repairs? Yeah, he had no formal invoice, no joint assessment, nothing to back it up.
So this is it, the moment of truth. Was the court going to go with Wang's common sense but totally wrong idea of fault, or was it going to follow the actual letter of the road traffic safety law?
The court's decision was a huge statement. It threw out all of Wang's claims for vehicle repair, for lost wages, for transportation, all of it. out of the thousands of yuan he was demanding, the court awarded him a purely symbolic, wait for it, 130 yuan. Basically a tiny piece of his medical bill. His lawsuit had completely and utterly backfired.
Look, this isn't just some weird story about one traffic accident. It's actually a really powerful lesson in legal philosophy and the values that are baked right into traffic law.
So what do we take away from all this? First, and this is the big one, there's a huge difference between fault and liability. Second, the law is written this way on purpose to protect the vulnerable, because a human being is always more important than a piece of machinery. And finally, it's a pretty stark reminder that our own gut feeling about what's fair isn't always how the law is written. And that kind of leaves us with one last and honestly more unsettling thought. The legal system here worked perfectly. It protected an elderly, vulnerable man from a baseless and aggressive lawsuit, but the case also shines a light on a really ugly side of human nature. The law can give us justice, but it can't really answer the lingering question, why do we even need laws to protect us from such a basic lack of decency in the first place?